the most difficult thing to come up with was an environmental quality. What's our environmental philosophy? Because, again, there were no books to tell us what to do. There was no books on how to make more sustainable clothing. And we were wrestling with this, and then one day we opened a store in Boston, and it was an old building that we restored, and it was springtime, and we brought in all the sportswear and filled up the store and opened it. And within 3 days, my employees were saying they're getting headaches. And so we closed the store, brought in an environmental engineer, and he said, "Oh, your ventilation system isn't working. It's recirculating the same air." But I said, "Well, why are they getting headaches?" "Well, it's got all this formaldehyde and all this clothes that you have in here, and you got a closed room." "Well, what's the formaldehyde doing here?" "Well," he said, "there's formaldehyde on cotton." What? You know, when I started looking it up, I realized that on your average, on your 100% cotton clothing, on average, it's only 73% cotton. The rest are chemicals put on afterwards to make it stay pressed and keep it from shrinking and wrinkling. And they use formaldehyde, which, you know, in biology class, that's what, you got a lizard in a jar, and that's formaldehyde. And they use formaldehyde in making plywood, glues, and they use it all over society. And it's absolutely a toxic chemical. It's one of the, 80,000 chemicals in America, of which only 200 have been tested to see whether they're toxic or not. And formaldehyde is one that they have identified as being carcinogenic. So we asked our question, okay, well, what should we be making clothing out of? If we don't want to use industrially grown cotton or chemically altered cotton. So in doing our studies, we found out that the worst possible fiber to be making clothing is 100% industrially grown pure cotton. And that's because something like 25% of the world's pesticide use is used on cotton fields, and it only occupies 3% of the world's farmland. So it uses an inordinate amount of chemicals. To defoliate the plant so the mechanical pickers can pick it, they use a chemical similar to Agent Orange that we destroyed Vietnam with to defoliate the plant. The cancer rate in Central Valley in California is 10 times normal. There's crop dusters flying over your head all the time. We went and looked at cotton fields, and it's a killing zone. There's nothing alive. There's no birds, there's no bugs, there's no weeds, and there's no runoff from the Central Valley in California. It just runs. So all that water runs off the cotton fields and ends up in these sumps over in the western side of the valley. Kesterson, you've probably heard of that. And you get all this selenium and of course the fields get solanated after a while. And there's these guys sitting on lawn chairs at these ponds with shotguns and cannons to scare away the waterfowl, because if they land on those ponds and ingest some of that water, they end up with chicks with 2 beaks and 3 legs. And I'm not exaggerating. I just said, okay, I don't want to be in the cotton business if that's what I have to use. Well, thankfully, there was organically grown cotton, but there wasn't hardly any being grown anymore. A few companies had tried it. I gave the company 18 months to get out of the industrial cotton business. Otherwise, that's it. And it was 25% of our business. So that got everybody's attention. But it wasn't easy because the cotton farmers couldn't get loans from the bank. We had to co-sign their loans so that they go grow the cotton organically. And then we had to go to the gens, which separate the seeds, and it's dripping with cottonseed oil, which is really, that's where all the toxins are. You know, if you're eating chips with cottonseed oil, forget it. You're poisoning yourself. And it's not regulated by the EPA. And they're feeding it to cattle. The cottonseed are being fed to cattle, and you eat the beef, you're poisoning yourself. And then, you know, we went to the spinners, and we had to talk to these gins to clean their machine before they ran our stuff. And then you go to the gin, who, no, not the gin, but the spinners who spin the yarn, and they don't want to deal with our cotton because it comes in with seeds and stems and leaves, and it's sticky, and it's kind of like bad dope, you know. I figured some of you could relate to that. So, you know, it's sticky because of all the aphids, and but we found one spinner in Thailand who believed in what we were trying to do, and he said, I'll try to figure it out. And he figured out a method where he freezes the cotton so that it goes through the spinning machines smoothly. And so we had to find partners to work with, and it wasn't easy, but in 18 months we completely got out of the using industrially grown cotton and went to organic. That was asking one question. So then, well, what are we going to dye it with? Are dyes toxic? You know, there's different dyes, different chemicals for polyester, for nylon, for dyeing cotton. We didn't know. Well, we just bought dyed cloth. So then we look into it and we find out, yeah, dyes are toxic, but there's some companies in Europe that make non-toxic cotton dyes. But some colors are still toxic. And here's the colors, and so, okay, so now we know. Well, where is the dyeing going to be done? Is it a dyeing factory that has an outfall going into a river that's polluting a river? We went to Portugal. That's where we get a lot of flannel shirts, and Portugal's famous for flannel. Well, sure enough, along the river, the Douro River in Portugal, there's a dye house, and you pull in water, they dye their stuff, boom, the outfall goes right into the river. There's another dye house down below and another one. It's a whole series of dye houses. The last one down near the mouth of the river can't use the river water because it's black, it's jet black. So they had to put in all this West German expensive machinery to clean the water, and then they dye their goods, and then they run it through the machine again so that their outfall is clean. So there we go. How about water? How much is, you know, does water, how much water, what's our carbon footprint in making clothing? Does water have anything to do with it? Use of water? Yeah, turns out, you know, to make one of our t-shirts, organically grown t-shirts uses 200 gallons of water, and a non-organic t-shirt uses 1,200 gallons of water. Is water just water? No, it makes a big difference whether you're using irrigated water, where it comes out of a dam, that they dammed a river and destroyed people's lives and destroyed runs of salmon and stuff like that. There's a big difference whether you use that water or you use rainwater. So it makes a big difference where your cotton is grown. Anyway, leading examine life like this in business it can be a real pain in the ass, I can tell you. But when you educate yourself, you know you're left with choices. Uneducated people have no choices. You know, the lumberjack that is fighting to death to keep cutting trees is because he's scared to death. That's all he knows to do. And so once you've educated yourself and you realize what you're doing wrong, stop doing it.